Welcome to public forum on the proposed Tuftonboro Community Solar Project to be located here at the Central Fire Station. It's a group of Tuftonboro residents and Doug Smithwood, who has a lot of experience with solar, have been gathering over the last several months to put together a project that might make some sense. And some of you, many of you may have heard various little bits and pieces about potential siting for the array and how the whole thing would come together. And I'm happy to see you here this evening so that we can have some dialogue and get some public input as we look at going forward. So Lee White is going to stand up and tell you a little bit about the project, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah, just very quickly, the project really has three purposes. The first one is to provide financial assistance to our town by reducing the cost of electricity for the fire station, and by reducing the cost of electricity to approximately, and we're not sure about this number, but approximately 17 families that fall into the low to middle income category who struggle to pay their electric bills. That's the first one, the financial assistance. The second one is to provide a source of community education relative to the advantages of alternative forms of electrical generation, solar, wind, water, versus the traditional ones that we've all used, burning oil, coal, propane, electricity for our heat. And the third is to stimulate thought about alternative energy projects which the town might undertake in the future. This might be just the beginning, but we're going to look for feedback. We want input, but those of us that are on the committee see this as a real opportunity to make economical sense as well as helping our environment. So those are the purposes.
I'd like to briefly acknowledge the members of the group that have been working on the project. And if you'll stand up as I mention your names: Steve Wingate, Dan Lake, Lee White, Doug Smithwood, and we also have a couple more who are not with us here this evening.
And you didn't include yourself.
You're right. And Kim Fraze is here from Fraze Electric. He's a guru on solar PV. So Doug?
Well, thanks for coming. This is a pretty unique project that was first presented to the Board of Selectmen in February of 2017, and got the approval that they were interested in it. But when we looked at the finance of it, it was a very tough financial situation to make it go. And then later in 2017, grant funding became available from the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission. It's a whole new program. It's never been used before, and they were looking for pilots. And we presented this as a pilot for grant funding. So the funding for this comes from a grant. Although as far as a community contribution, and they were looking for that, we put in for 400 hours of volunteer service, both for administrating it, managing it. We've already put in a whole bunch of hours into this before, and also for potentially installing ground-mounted components, which are just like installing an erector set. It's nuts and bolts, and you don't have to go over 8 feet tall and stuff, so it's not a hazardous situation. So that's how this all came about. And let's see. Oh. So there's a lot of different options available for actually installing this. And these are just some of the options that we looked at. We actually, the bid, the proposal, the grant proposal was for the array located on the hill, which is the most expensive of all. So unless we put it somewhere in the woods over there, which wouldn't work. But so, you know, that was one of the proposals. Other ones are going to be less expensive. So if we get, if the grant is accepted, it would be fairly easy to look at other less costly options, where if we initially did the grant, you know, closer to the fire station and then decided to move it further away, it might exceed the grant funding and would be a problem. So you can see that we've looked at a whole bunch of different variety of these. This is ground mounted. I'm going to go into what that is. This is actually the thought of having a picnic pavilion with solar panels on the roof, the back roof of the fire station, and then ground mounts out in the back parking lot of the fire station. And those are just the options that we came up with. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just explain a little bit about the basics of the array, and then we were going to take a site visit outside. Hopefully it isn't going to be raining, for about 20 minutes to show you some of the options that we looked at and discuss them, so you have a more familiar you know, view of them. And so so this is what I'm going to do right now. Just talk about these before we go out to the for the site visit. So this is your solar panel. This is actually the solar panels that we're looking at using. They're really high efficiency solar panels. They're made by a company that it's $1 trillion company. I don't know if some of the people I heard actually have solar on their roof, and they must have gone through this process. That these panels have a 20-25 year warranty, but if solar panel companies have gone out of business in fairly large numbers, and a warranty on a company that's out of business isn't a warranty at all. So these are LG panels. They are affected by that tariff that you've heard about, and that's all factored into the grant funding. But this is a $1 trillion company that does this, and it's not going out of business. So they will be able to honor these throughout. So these solar panels here are about 40 inches wide and 60 inches long. Is that
66.
66. So just these panels last a long time. If you put in megawatts of these panels, have you ever had a panel failure?
I've had one in over 3 megawatts, one panel.
One panel, and yeah, and he's put up thousands of panels. So they're very highly durable. They're really not needing any maintenance at all, and they'll last for 20-25 years. The array that we're looking at doing is throwing out all these numbers probably doesn't make much sense to people, but the array that we're looking at will produce about 55,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. And just so you have some perspective of that, the average household utilizes about 7,380, so this array would fulfill the entire needs of about, what, 7.5, a little less than 7.5 households. So you can kind of get a perspective of that. The fire station uses 56,000, and that was the intention of siting it here, because the fire station is the biggest municipal user of electricity, and that makes a big difference economically, and we'll go into that in a minute. So, you know, you put these at some other site, you know, municipal site that doesn't use a lot of electricity, the economics are much, much worse. And the last things, the array can either be a ground mounted array, and we'll show you some pictures of that, a roof-mounted array, or a combination of roof-mounted and ground-mounted. The reason I didn't put a roof-mounted exclusively is because in this location, the firehouse, the roof is not in the ideal location to put all the solar panels. It's easterly, it's 145 degrees, and so it will produce the majority of its electricity in the early to mid-morning. So we actually want to have the array producing electricity throughout the day to match the fire station's electric usage. If the entire ground mount array was put in one long line, it would be about 250 feet long and about 11 feet high. That's to the top of the panels, not to the top of the brackets.
How many panels are in that?
134,
Okay.
that'll be in here too.
Yep. Yep.
So these are high efficiency panels. If you have lower efficiency, the other ones we looked at were 150 panels to make up the same amount of kilowatts. So as far as the economics go, and this is the economics, and it's just, I don't know if you looked at your co-op rates, they just changed. So this is the ones that they've gone into it, is it the spring and summer rates or just summer rates?
They changed when they calculated now, so there's not such a difference between summer and winter. So they were, in theory, it was supposed to stay about the same all year round, rather than based it on the cheapest rate and the highest rate. They swung everything 3 months, but so it'll be interesting to see where it stays for the next couple of years.
So this just changed. It was so here's your solar array, whether it's on a roof or a ground mount. It produces electricity in direct current. There's this box. You can see them here called inverters that would go in the utility area of the fire station. That converts that from direct current to alternating current. Any electricity from that the fire station needs immediately, that it's using right now for these lights in here, if it was during daylight time, or for any other usage, would go directly to the fire station's usage. If there was an excess amount of electricity occurring, it would be exported out to the grid. And then at night, or when the demand of the fire station is more than the solar array will produce, like on a very cloudy day, you are importing it from the co-op back in. So that's imported, exported, and then direct use. This is called behind the meter use. And the Tuftonboro Community Solar Project would sell that electricity to the fire station at the current, using the current rates at about 14 cents per kilowatt hour. The fire station, if it had to import this, and this is the new rates, so the fire station, all the electricity that's imported is 16.735 cents a kilowatt hour. So you can see that this is about, 20% less than if it was getting it directly from the co-op. We want to maximize this both for the fire station and for the community solar project, because if the solar is producing more than the fire station's using and we're exporting it, the co-op only gives us a little over 9 cents a kilowatt. So we're sizing this array and going to orient this to try to match the profile of usage of the fire station the best we can. And if you can get a match of 40-45%, you're doing very, very well. So that's part of the economics of it, and we want to do that as best as possible. This is just a summary. The blue is the co-op, the red is the community solar, and then the black is between the co-op and the community solar project. So as I said, it used to be 18 cents just weeks ago. But I looked at it again today, and it had gone down, so I put the new number in there. That's what it costs the fire station for every kilowatt hour. This is what the solar array will get for anything exporting it, and this is what the fire station can buy it from the solar array at. It's 14 cents. And once you build a solar array, like I said, the maintenance is fairly trivial. And any maintenance is usually not the solar panels, it's those things called the inverters that change it from direct current to alternating current. That's in the model, to have that money set aside after the warranty, which is a 12-year warranty on those?
Yes.
And after the warranty goes, to have money set aside to replace those. The panels probably will not have to be replaced during their lifetime. So to maximize generation, if that was your sole goal, to maximize generation, the best way to do it is to orient the panels so that they're all facing true south, which is 180 degrees, and to have them tilted. Is it 40 degrees or a little less than that?
A little less,
It's
35,
a little less, but so you could do it by maximizing the tilt and the direction of the panels. But when you're trying to produce electricity throughout the day to get that 14 cents versus only 9 cents, you're not going to orient them to get the maximum generation. You're going to orient them to get the maximum revenue from them. So the more revenue we get, the more we can help low and moderate income families. And we'll look at the economics of that later on. So with the maximum revenue or savings for the fire station, revenue for the community solar project is to match the best we can the usage of the fire station. This is, Steve told me not to get too technical, so I hope I didn't do this. I just wanted to show you kind of so this is true south, and this is the tilt, and this is for Concord. But it shows you that when you go from true south, and the best tilt, which is showing here is about 35, that's the bullseye, that's the best. When you go out, you lose some of your generation, but it's not huge. So if you go out to the yellow, you've only lost 5%. So we could tilt it from, even 130 to get that early morning sunshine, all the way to maybe not to 240, to 2:30 to get the late afternoon sunshine, to mirror the fire station's use the best we can. And there's another thing that's probably going in the weeds too, that what's a good tilt in the winter is not the best tilt in the summer, as you probably all know. To have them tilted at a much steeper angle in the summer, because the sun's higher. You want the sun to be coming down directly perpendicular to the panels. And you can also, with the ground mount, you can mess around with that. You can have some of them tilted at an angle more for the winter conditions, and others for the summer conditions. And that kind of can depend on what you're using the electricity for and when the fire station's peak need is. And the peak need of the fire station is not continuous year-round, each month. It varies quite a bit per month. So you want to tailor it to that also. Here's our fire station, just showing you what the panels on a fire station roof look like. Lee, Dan, and I we are members of All Saints Church, and we put 25 kilowatts on our church in Wolfboro. And when we did it, we actually did not maximize the roof area. And one of the reasons we won't want to here is because the orientation, all the panels would be in the exact same orientation, which would not be good. But the other reason is to provide, especially at the fire station, but really everywhere, to provide a meter of egress for firefighters or for maintenance operations, to people to go up on each side and across the top of the array, and to be able to mount a ladder that you have foot space to get up on safely. And besides the safety factor, why I like it too, and when we were at All Saints Church, we look at aesthetics. We wanted to maximize, but looking good, especially with a number of people not really used to seeing solar panels on things, don't think they look so good. And I'm sure like 100 years ago, when they were putting telephone poles in, people thought those telephone poles looked terrible, up and down our streets. But to make it look better, you kind of frame it so it looks like it's in a frame. and it seems to, I think it makes it look more appealing. So that was the roof mount on the fire station, and this is what a ground mount looks like. And this is the orientation we were looking at doing. You can do them portrait up and down or landscape across like that. And we were looking at doing 3 high, which will give you about pretty close at 11 feet of height.
Yeah, with 3, yeah.
And we were going to do these in sections, with each section having 15 or 18 panels on the ground mount. And each one of them can be oriented differently. And those will be about 32 feet long, each of those sections. So you can put different sections in different areas, but it makes sense not to do it excessively because it adds to the labor cost. So one of the things that we really were concerned about is, especially in the park, but really anywhere, is not to disturb the area that much, to keep it as, as natural as possible. So instead of putting big concrete foundations that will look maybe unsightly depending on your viewpoint, this whole array will be done by these auger earth screws that screw in, they screw out. So after its life expectancy, the decommissioning, the taking it apart and removing it is pretty easy. You're not pulling out all this concrete foundation. And this is kind of very similar to the system. It's called a racking system, the foundational bracing system for it. We're going to have 2 poles with a cross member. Unlike this one, is a single pole, just so that it's more durable for the heavy snow load and wind load that we get around here. So we thought we'd go out. I was wondering, Steve, would you mind just leading the site visit just to show them the different spots that we were looking at, the field? I was going to come out too, but I was going to run back in to boot up the next section before everyone else came back in. Is it? I should have asked you that before.
Okay.
Everyone want to just take just a quick walk outside? And Adam, if from the back one, for that option 3, if you could show us the limitations of that, that'd be great. Brought up things that want things, and then you won't have to listen to me anymore. Bill will lead the discussion and get some input from the public. But so for the next 15 minutes, just look at a little of the history, talk about what is the grant criteria, what's the purpose of the grant, and then some of the benefits to people in the community that will get electric assistance, and the town. We've talked about some of these before, and I'll try not to repeat them too much. So as I said, it started back in February 2017. There was no grant funding available at all at the time. I met with Revision Energy, another electric provider that does community solar projects, and we looked at the economics, and it just wasn't really workable. And then actually one of our local senators from my town, Tuftonboro, sponsored a bill last year after our meeting, and it was a bipartisan bill. It was sponsored by probably 20 different senators, and part of that bill was to provide grant funding for solar projects that benefit low and moderate income people. And that's people that live at least 300% or below the poverty level. And that changes what the poverty level is. The income criteria depends on the amount of people in your family. 75 people last year in Tuftonboro applied for state assistance and got state assistance for their electricity. That's the 200% poverty level that they needed. And that's only 30% of the people in the town that qualify. So there's probably, if you just do the math, there's close to 200, there's not quite 200, maybe more towards 175 people in the town that meet the criteria of living and having income at 300% or below the poverty level. And when you looked at the demographics of that, the majority of those were senior citizens. The second biggest one were families with young children under 6, and then the rest fell in the middle. So there's a need that goes far beyond this solar project. The solar project, if it works at its best, will give assistance to about 17, 18 families at the same level that at a fairly comparable level to other state programs. So the grant funding, like I said, it's exclusively for community-based projects that benefit low and moderate income people. It's not one of those things like that, people that rent that have adequate income or that have shaded roofs combined with some kind of group community. The minimum amount that you could request for the grant was 50 grand, and the max was 150, and our grant request was 138 somewhere in there. So we tried to kind of maximize that, but also we looked at what the fire station can use, and that's came out to about the 45 kilowatt system. The grant funding is set up to pay for all the materials for this and to pay for the contractor to do this. But there is a component of volunteer work, in particular to set up the solar array and to do the administration and organization and other parts of that. And we put in, we thought we could get about 400 volunteer hours. And I've actually reached out to some different groups, but I didn't want to reach out too much because I don't even know if we're going to get the grant. So this is kind of a repeat. 12 to 18 low and moderate income families, depends on the level of assistance you give each to them. And that we want, the fire station will save money by getting below market electricity, and the solar project will get a heightened rate compared to what the co-op would pay if we exported it. So it's a true win-win. This is just some of the math in here. 85% of the generation, and this is like the income generation scenario, and this is actually pretty conservative because during the first 10 years, money's going to be set aside for any replacements of parts as required by the grant, and this also makes sense. So we have a $5,000 fund that's taken out of this, and that's why that's not 100%, but 85%. And also there's additional payments you get for making clean energy. You actually get an extra, it's been anywhere between $20 and $55 a megawatt, and this will produce 55 megawatts a year. You get that for every megawatt you produce in a check. So that's additional funding. We were looking at a base rate of helping people out at $25 a month. They qualify for this, and they were going to qualify through initially through Tri-County CAP, and that's how people qualify for electric assistance. It's a very onerous thing, and I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people that would qualify don't do it. But the thought is that people, after a period of time, and we have a, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but the low-income families, after a 5-year period that have done energy efficiency improvements, could actually own between 2 and 3.5 kilowatts of generation from the array. And so that they would have that throughout the life of the array, or it would be based on their number of people in their household, where 2 would be for a single family household, and then it would go up by 0.5 kilowatts for every additional person, up to 3.5. So this is where we get the 18. If we give each family $25 a month towards their electric bill, we could help 18 families out doing that. And this is going up because this is projected at electric rates to go up 3% a year, which is fairly conservative. But it's could be highly variable too. In Wolfboro, our electric rate last year went up 10%, and this year is going up over 7%. When we did all the 3% projections for our church array, we immediately were saving a lot more money than we thought we were, so it made a good situation even better. So these are the ones that we talked about. Little recap here. Just the thought that putting them all on the roof will not maximize the revenue. The combination of a ground mount, a complete ground mount, or a combination of roof and ground mount would be financially the best. Oops, shoot. Oh, well, you can see some of the thoughts of how do I get back? These are slides I wasn't going to even show you because these are from the presentation I did a long time ago. Oh shoot.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I was just going to go over the three options, and just to give a reminder, you probably don't even need that, but to kind of set up Bill's discussion with everyone. Oh, there we go. So option one, 2 tiers, a 120-foot tier on the top going along the contour, 150-foot tier below that, trench, across to the utility room, all ground mount. Option 2, putting 25 kilowatts along the volleyball border and putting 20 on the roof. We'll give you all the different orientations, and you can set that so that you'll be making electricity from in the morning all through the day.
You still have the trench for that, right?
Yeah, you still have to trench along here, which is difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's ledge, so that is a concern. And the one in the brochure there is different than this because you can put these in all these different arrays. You can see this late afternoon sun from the shading. Even a little bit of shade is pretty deadly to solar. So I don't know if we can work around this to look at the snow removal patterns. Maybe all 4 of these, this would be 20 kilowatts here, 4 30-foot ground mounted arrays, and putting the other 25 on the roof. But that was the thought there. I don't know if we could, have this more of a plow area, have this as a plow area through here. But if it has to come over here, of course it can't. So
It's the third one, again, that's a curb cut to get to the road.
this is the third one.
The third one, yes.
So in the future,
That could be opened up
okay.
and go back.
I mean, these things are semi-portable. It's expensive. These augers go in, these augers come out. But do you think that that's something that will most likely happen in the next
It could.
15, 20 years?
Oh, yeah.
It was designed that way so that we could have access to both sides of the
Right.
station.
Well, you can also, put 3 of them in and put more on here, but you're not going to produce as much electricity throughout the day as you would. You're going to have a lot of early morning electricity. The fire station would probably far exceed what the fire station could use. We haven't, to tell the actual configuration that makes sense, we have not looked at the profile of the demand of the fire station. A house profile is pretty typical. I don't know anything about, does the fire station use pretty level amounts of electricity throughout the day? Most people use a huge amount of electricity in the late afternoon, in the summer. So that the demand profile is not even at all. I don't know what the fire station is. One of the things we got to look into. And luckily with the co-op, you have that all available on the web. You can look at, you know, how much electricity you use every hour of the day, you know, 365 days a year. So that's one of the things that we would want to actually locate these to meet that demand. But I mean, if you can't put 4 in, we could put 3 in, but potentially, but to put one way over here wouldn't make sense, and there's a lot of shading there, so. But that's a potential option, you know, and there's all the varieties of that, so. So I think that's it. It's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Doug. So those are 3 installation options. They're not the only options. The concept started with one, which was having the arrays all up by the field, and then is sort of broadened out as the discussion has gone on. And I would be happy to, number 1, try and field any questions, and number 2, certainly take other variations as a possible arrangement, comments on what you've seen, things that we haven't addressed that might be questions in your mind.
A question going back to the 14 cents an hour the fire station would pay.
Right.
And that would go out to low-income families. Who administers that?
That
How does that get done?
the way the model is set up is that a nonprofit will be organized to administer that.
Oh, so there's nothing in place to,
Not yet, no, but there's no money in place yet either.
Right.
So as the process, my understanding is the process goes forward with the review for the grant, there will be interview, maybe conversation relative to that. Once the indication is there that the grant's coming through, there'll be opportunity to organize the nonprofit to step forward and run it. But it won't, it will not, it will not be administered by the town. It will not be using tax dollars to do any of that.
they would mention that, was it Carroll County something?
TRICAP, yeah.
Yeah, would they be?
Community action?
Yeah, would they be candidates or something?
They're the ones that, the state requires that people be qualified for this. And so the TRICAP would qualify them. They do this all the time. And for us to go in and go through people's incomes,
Yeah.
none of us are gonna do that.
There's not enough
No.
money in it.
No. So the state pays TRICAP to qualify people, and so we're gonna utilize them.
Okay.
So on the back of your agenda is the timetable, and of course, everything was kind of hurried with the PUC, so this, everything might be kicked down, but this is according to the first part is according to what the PUC said, when they're gonna tell us what happens, when the interviews are gonna happen, when the executive council is gonna make its decision and stuff. But it doesn't cost a lot of money to form a nonprofit, but it takes time and effort and a lot of thought. And we've been thinking about it some, but until we know if we get the grant, it didn't seem too logical to move forward with that until then. But hopefully we have some people in the community that really know how to do that quickly. There's so many small groups that form nonprofit status all over the place. I think that expertise is really.
Barry?
Yeah, that 55,000 kilowatts or whatever, that grant is for, you gotta produce that much, and it seems as though the fire station's gonna take all of that, because their number was just about that. So what would happen if they gave you a grant and you're supposed to help the low-income people out, but none of that electricity ever gets out of the fire station, because you had lousy weather and you couldn't produce enough kilowatts that year? Is there any repercussion on that? Because all of a sudden, well, we got this grant to help the low income out, but we're just taking care of the fire station.
Well, I think, and I'll turn to Kim in just a second on that, because he's done a lot of solar installations. but the money that goes to support the low and moderate income folks is from selling the power from the arrays to the town, okay? Now, if you don't generate any, you don't generate any revenue. That's your question, right? Kim, you've been doing this for a long time.
Well,
but-
the question is kind of, it's produces 55,000 kilowatts per year.
Right.
And the fire station uses 56,000 kilowatts per year.
Okay,
So where is the extra gonna come to support low-income families?
no,
It's the money,
what
the
support-
14
what
cents at the
supports the
fire
low-income families is the power that's generated by the solar array.
We're using
The solar array
power,
sells the power to the town.
and the town pays for it through that 14 cents a pair.
Right. So instead of paying the Hampshire Electric Co-op for the electricity.
16 cents.
Right, you pay 14 cents, thereabouts, to the community solar.
2 cents you're saving goes to the,
So you're paying a little less for the power. The bulk of the value of the power is going into the fund that then goes to help the low income utility users. Make sense? Adam?
So is the nonprofit responsible for fixing anything that goes wrong with the solar array?
The
Over the period of
nonprofit is responsible for administering the program, including maintenance and repair.
So they'll do any shoveling or cleaning of the arrays or whatever needs to be done with them, we won't be responsible for that?
Yes, that's my understanding. I mean, it depends upon how, this whole thing is not designed to be a burden to fire and rescue at all. And so any repair, maintenance, and other work with respect to the array is the responsibility of the group that administers it.
Well, the first 5 years would be on the installer, or me in this case, I guess. Then after that, there must be money set aside. You said you're setting money aside for it. That was built into your formula, right?
Yep, so there's two funds, a decommissioning fund, and that's why they're not giving 100% to low and moderate income families. So it's, the design of it is to, within a 10-year period, to have two funds, one to take the thing out at the end of its life, and the other one for maintenance and replacements of parts in operation, so. And that's gonna accumulate over the 10 years, and then if we don't need that, sometimes these things really need very little maintenance. You know, we're gonna be able to give more to low-income people. It might go up to 100%. We have the money we need in this designated fund, and we don't need to set aside anymore.
Gina?
So after the 25 years, when end of their life, is there another grant to replace them, or it's just the end of the cycle?
Yeah, there's not enough. We're all. Probably not.
That would be helpful.
No, we're not.
Battery powered, then.
They'll still be working, they're just not gonna be making as much power.
Right.
They'll probably last 50 years, they're not gonna make 55,000 kilowatts. They'll probably make 40,000 or they'll make 25% less than that, so they'll probably make 35, or whatever the math is, 1,000 kilowatt hours at that time. Maybe a few would have failed by then, but I doubt you'll have many fail. I mean, there's solar panels have been put in, off-grid houses in Sandwich in the 70s, and they're still working now. They're not making as much energy as they did then, but they're still working.
So they lose
They lose
efficiency.
a little bit of efficiency, not very much, but they lose a little bit over time, some degradation. A little bit is soiling, because, you're not gonna go up and squeegee them Mother Nature does a pretty good job of cleaning them, but, it's not perfect, so that's factored into the calculation for how much energy they produce a year. The only thing that probably isn't, it's based on 30 years of average weather, and based on New Hampshire's, Concord's weather, is what it's based on for the sun to snow. Probably the only thing that they can't really factor in accurately is how much you lose when the snow stays on the panels for a prolonged period of time, because there's just too many different site conditions that it varies from one job to the other. But in this case, with the ground mount being at the angle it is, you're not gonna lose that many days, and if the days you're losing is lousy. real cloudy days probably anyway. And the pitch of if you put them on the roof, the pitch of the roof is pretty steep, so you're not gonna be losing much because of snow that stays on for weeks or months, where some flatter roofs, and when I do flat rooftops, I figure the whole month of January and February not making any energy just because of that, but that's not gonna be the situation here.
We are hoping to have volunteers who will broom off not the ones on the roof, those are on their own. Those will probably cat off pretty quickly, but any ground mounts, But if we can't get volunteers to help do that, then they just won't produce them.
So does the panel produce electricity if it's only half covered with snow?
Yes and no, it depends on which half, or how it's covered, well, actually, the way these ground mounts are, it could be possibly because of the way the strings are run on the panel, but typically shade on any panel takes out, a good portion, depending on which way the shade hits the panel, it could take out the whole panel. A branch, could take out a heavy branch shade, could take out a whole panel, going one way, but if going the wrong way with it, may only take out a third of the panel.
Skip?
It sounds like this whole project's based on a grant being awarded, correct?
That's correct.
Now, do the townspeople have any say in whether this goes forward or not, seeing this is going on public property, or? There hasn't been a lot of information on this, and the reason I really know about it is from working here.
Right.
But the average townsperson, I guarantee you, if you ask them about it, they have no idea what's going on. All of a sudden, they're driving by a pristine, field that's out there, that's used for recreation a lot of the time, and now all of a sudden, there's solar arrays up there. Is this something, is it gonna be a decision made, with public input as to whether or not this goes forward, or is this just something that's gonna happen if the grant gets awarded?
There will be public input beyond tonight's session, and what we're trying to do is get the word out and get people engaged and providing feedback about citing and the whole process.
So it doesn't have to go to a town meeting?
And who makes the final decision as far as the residents of town go? Is that up to you guys, up to the board, or how does it progress to?
Well,
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No,
It's
I
just
guess.
something that it's going to come up.
Yep, and what I would say is if it's a particularly controversial issue, then it absolutely makes sense for it to go to town meeting.
Because looking at the time frame, it looks like that if the grant gets awarded, everything is going to happen fast.
And my understanding is the grant expenditure period actually extends out beyond the end of the year, right?
It does.
It's into 20.
The absolute end date for completion, I believe, is actually June of 2019. Of course, you're not making any,
Right.
you're not helping anyone for a long time. if you
I
delay
understand
it.
that. Like I said, I'm not against the project in general, but it's just, like I said, I haven't lived in town a long time, but I've been long enough that people really value the landscape of the town. And you've got an area here that's, is really a beautiful place to drive through, and then some people like arrays, some people think they're the ugliest things in the world. And then again, it depends on how they're set up and what the landscape looks like around them. So I've seen some that are actually fit right into the landscape fine, but I've also seen others that they're the ugliest things in the world.
Mhm.
Well, why are these things even here? And I know, I understand the whole concept of the project, but it would be nice if, the public actually had a little more input, and I'm kind of glad to hear that.
That's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So it would be nice if the room were full tonight, for sure.
There really hasn't been a lot of information out there that this meeting was gonna happen that I've heard, other than what was in the paper, a month or so ago, or, again, being in the building
Last
Mhm.
week.
a couple times a week, yeah. That's about the only time we really knew about it.
And as controversial that this fire station was or the library, I would think that it would be, especially where it's town park,
Yeah.
there would be
Yeah.
more people that would have say in things.
I mean, it's a rural town, but that's really the only green space that the town has in the park. We haven't done much with it, like used to say.
It does get used a lot, though.
It does,
It does.
and it could be used more.
It would get used every
Yeah,
day
Barry?
if it had solar panels on.
To address those concerns, because it is a town park allegedly, I mean, there was a sign at one time that said Central Park.
Stuff like
Is
that.
it necessary for this project to work this way, but have the solar arrays up at the landfill and plug into the system there with the meters and stuff? Put them in a place that's unobtrusive, that people aren't gonna look at going by every day. Is there any,
I'm glad you asked the question. When we had our the group first got together, that question came out the first day. The difference is that if we put the array at the landfill, where virtually all the power gets sold directly to the co-op, it's worth about 9.5 cents kilowatt hour. If we put it where we use most of the power, then the revenue that generates is, let's say, 14 cents as opposed to 9.5, which is about, what, 50% more. So if it's sited someplace where all you're doing is feeding it directly into the grid, then what you're doing is you're generating less revenue to use in the assistance program.
but could you put more panels up there so that you could make double the electricity?
Bigger
To
array.
make up, if you have all that room, you can face them whichever way you want up there. You could make a lot more electricity up there.
Well, to stay within the grant, we're pretty much
We maximize the
we're
grant.
restricted to the size of the array that we're looking at right now, just from a cost standpoint. They're not
You're
looking to.
restricted to putting them here in the
Hmm?
park.
What's
But you
that?
had
Which
one
means you're
number up
restricted
there,
to putting them here in the
120
park.
feet, 11 feet tall, or whatever it was.
If they were all ground mounted,
Yeah.
we'd string on 250 feet
There
and make
you
it
go.
11 feet tall. But we will probably make 40–50% more revenue and be able to help 40–50% more, even maybe more than that, families by putting them into a place that has high internal demand. And besides the school, the fire station, I believe, has the highest demand. The transfer station has actually very low, surprisingly low demand. When we looked at that, it just wasn't economical. You'd
Yeah,
help
our second
So
largest
it has to
user
go
is-
back through a meter, basically, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The more you can use on site,
More
the
valuable.
much more valuable, yeah. And the landfill just doesn't use hardly any.
Because when I was involved in the hydro plant that Camp Mar Vista has, helping them install that. And we buried an underground wire from the plant 600 or 800 feet to get to the meter base at the dining hall, because that was their biggest user of electricity on,
Sure.
at the camp.
We're doing the same.
And they were only gonna get credit for that meter. Back through that meter, they couldn't get credit for another meter at camp. With that setup they had, and that was
Mm.
6 or 8 years ago, so. But it had to go back through a meter is what it amounted to.
Yep.
And that's what you're saying here, it has to go back through a meter to get the maximum.
Yeah, the revenue,
Yeah.
they were using, they sized it to use most of it on site.
Dave?
Two things. One, as far as location, I would encourage, there was some discussion about the roof going that way is east facing. And certainly you want to maximize that. But there are sort of two little wings that are pretty much south facing. And wondering if they might be utilized or even with some angle to catch some of that eastern facing. I just encourage thinking about it if it hasn't.
We
been.
actually have talked about that, and that has been brought up, but the shading that would happen for so much of the day on those wing roofs, I don't know what you call them, would be very substantial, and the generation would be quite poor.
And I'm presuming, it's been a while since I've read the ordinances here in town, but I know that there are some communities where something like this would come before the planning board for site plan review, if there are solar ordinances in place. And I know that at the state level, they're working on some model ordinances related to solar panels and installations that may be helpful.
Yep. Anybody else? Well, I appreciate everybody that's here coming out tonight, and I would encourage any additional thoughts or questions that you have, please get a hold of me or one of the other guys that's been working on it, or one of the other selectmen. And you know, what we do with this town going forward is very important to all of us. And Skip, I'm certainly as aware of the issues that you raise as you are. And we don't want to, it's not the intent here to do something that is going to be contentious or cause a problem or change the character in a negative way in the town. So,
No, like I say, I'm not against the project in any way, shape, or form.
It's-
Just the flow of information is nice and knowing what's going on.
Yep.
Rather than just having these things pop up and be a, hey, surprise.
right.
To a lot of
Why
people.
we're having this-
Because they're not gonna call me, they're gonna call you.
No, that's why we're having this get-together tonight. We're going to have another one. We haven't scheduled another one yet, but we will have another one. I would hope that we'll have it in the next few weeks. Probably a different date, a different day of the week than Monday, so that we can catch people that maybe didn't come tonight because it was on a Monday. But, you know, as you talk to people, encourage them to dig in and find out a little bit about it, and come sit with us. Take us aside, talk to us. I'm not a soothsayer, that's for sure, and I don't want to be one. So it's just a matter of, as a town, you know, how do we do the best thing going forward in all areas. All right,
And just before you go, if anyone's interested, should this go through, and we may be jumping that a little ahead, but if anyone's interested in volunteering for some of the site work installation, have a little sign-up sheet here, if it does go through. And also, involved with this is some education of the folks that we are trying to help with their electric bills. And the education has to do with perhaps visiting with them in their homes. We've even suggested taking light bulbs to them that don't consume as much electricity as possible, and just looking at their home and trying to give them a little bit of advice. So if anyone's interested in either of those things, should all of this go through, you can sign up here. It may be premature.
So if those 18 to 20 people, if no one comes forward
We will.
for assistance, where does the money go then?
We will be, like, where does the money go if nobody comes forward?
People
I
can
can't
come forward
imagine.
now.
I can't imagine if we're.
People are already coming forward for assistance, and you tap into that.
There is, people go to Tri-County Cap
Yeah.
already. 75, 80 people from Tuftonboro go there every year, and we're going to utilize them directly.
And some of those don't qualify for the existing levels of reimbursement, okay? So if we're looking at kind of piggybacking on that, people that are in a tight situation but don't qualify under the state guidelines would qualify under the guidelines of this program.
Reading on the New Hampshire Co-op's website, I believe they said they don't issue money, they issue credits. And those credits obviously could be distributed to these families, but just, if that's right, then you won't give them a check that they can buy beer with. It will only be able to be used
No.
For
for
electricity.
electricity.
Absolutely.
The
That's
utility
good, very good,
assistance-
very good
It's
point.
going to
Utility
their
assistance
account, not
gets
to their
applied to
person.
their electric bill.
Yes.
Right.
They're not getting
That's why I didn't
funds,
sign
they
up.
would not get funds directly from this project.
Right.
Good point. So if anyone's interested, I'll leave this in the back there. Maybe premature.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
So,
Dan, good to see you, sir.